Marion has taught undergraduate and graduate level courses in mediation and nonprofit management. She has also served as an executive director for several social service agencies in British Columbia. Mieko Ise has been a caregiver to both parents and in-laws for the past 10 years. It's Mieko's intention to use her lived experiences to help other caregivers with their journeys and to be a catalyst for enhancing interactions between caregivers and healthcare professionals. Currently, she's involved with the Ontario Caregiver Organization, advising on the creation of new caregiver programs and services. So welcome, Marion and Mieko. So nice to see you again.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Susan, for that generous introduction. It's really wonderful to be back again. Mieko and I really enjoyed being with you all last week and look forward to future conversations. So as Susan said, today we're going to talk about conflict, and we have a very brief amount of time, so it's really just a sampler of the concepts. Before we begin, I like to take a moment to just acknowledge where I am, and I invite all of you to take a moment and just notice the chair under your body and the floor under your chair, and beneath that, possibly more walls and floor, but ultimately the earth beneath that. And I've learned about land acknowledgements that it's important to think about the land itself and to acknowledge and express gratitude for the land. And as I do that and think about what's growing in my garden and how grateful I am to live in the place where I live, which is Nogo-Jiwanong, or Peterborough, the place at the end of the rapids, I'm also grateful for the generations of stewardship on this land of the Michi-Sagig Anishinaabe people. And my right to be here is governed by the Williams Treaty. And I'm just learning about that treaty. And your right, if you're non-Indigenous, is also governed by a treaty of some kind. So as we step into this discussion about conflict, I just invite us to think about how our inner experiences and interpersonal experiences also nest within larger social and systemic situations. And on this continent, that larger conflict that we nest within is the conflict between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people over treaties, nation-to-nation treaties that are broken. So just thinking about how we interact with conflict begins at the personal level, but ultimately influences how we interact more widely. So just beginning with gratitude there and awareness, and just wanting to be transparent also about my own learning around all of that. So before I begin with the content of today's workshop, which will build on last week's material, and if you're new this week, don't worry, I'll review a little bit. And for those of you who were here last week, review is always really helpful. I've been practicing with nonviolent communication for 20 years, and I still get lots out of introductory workshops. And I'd like to take a moment and turn it over to Mieko. She and I have been having some really rich discussions, and she's been talking about how she's developed many of the same applications that I'll be talking about through trial and error over her years of caregiving. And so I think it's important for us to ground our thinking around this in the lived experience of you as caregivers, and Mieko has graciously agreed to do that. So Mieko, I was wondering, looking at the reflections that you have, if you would focus on maybe your first 2 pages of reflections now, and we'll hold off on the establishing partnerships page until after the presentation, because I think I have an idea for a little activity we can do, you and I can do around that. I won't do anything like super unexpected. It's just, yeah. So if you focus on those first 2 pages, then I think the 3rd page will fit really beautifully at the end.
Hey, I'm a caregiver. We're used to unexpected things and surprises, so no problems. Anyways, hi everybody. Glad to be back. As Susan said, I have no letters behind my name to prove my credentials as a caregiver other than living through it myself. So what I tell you is what I've learned on the ground as Marion said, trial and error. I usually had to learn my lessons over and over again. It wasn't an easy lesson, but you know, and the other thing is I'm still learning, but I definitely know I'm learning the lessons quicker now. And so I'm not being stuck as often. So that's the good news. And then the other thing, again, going back to last week's session, self-empathy, this is part of my self-empathy. I learned I didn't need to master anything that I'm learning. It's just a matter of knowing I'm growing from it and just going through it. So that really helped me a lot. So as Marion said, I had sort of 3 areas of conflict. Of course, there's conflict way more than 3, but I narrowed it down to 3. So the first one was a big one for me. It was about finding balance between 2 different caregiving needs. But actually, in the hindsight, I find that they weren't different. They just seemed to be different for me. And that was safety versus quality of life of my care recipients. So when I first started out, I would do everything to keep them safe. That was top priority, that at all costs, no matter what, they must be safe. So I would put in all these rules, I would put on all the mobility devices, everything, you know, and then, yes, they were definitely safer, but I noticed they weren't necessarily happier. And I realized, you know, I think I need to switch my priorities. I need to think that it's not just a matter of keeping people safe. It's a matter of letting them keep their dignity, something that honors their peace and contentment within the circumstances that are allowed. So we still have to keep them safe, but we have to sort of add those factors in as well. So this is how I kind of did it. I started to use, believe it or not, plain old common sense. So many times if my person I had some kind of ailment, I would alarm bells. Oh, we got to get ahead of this. We need to, and I'd be on the internet, you know, investigating and researching what it could mean. And then I started realizing, you know, taking them to the doctors, taking them to all these specialists and hospitals was so stressful for them. And usually when you go, you find out about 10,000 other things that are potentially wrong. And it was just stressing them out. So I started to step back, some common sense. Maybe they don't need to go to the doctors for everything. Maybe we can just handle some things at home, and especially smaller things. And that was a lot better. The other thing I did is I reviewed all their medication, because a lot of times you'd go and they would get one med for this, one med for that. And I started to really break it down, because sometimes they were taking meds as a side effect for the primary med that they were taking to actually deal with the problem they had. And that really helped out a lot, and they improved their quality of life. And then the biggest thing for me was to work on my incessant what if scenarios. I realized I just can't be going there all the time. I have to realize that this is their life and it's our life together. And, you know, it's not always going to be alarm bells and everything. So that's what I did a lot with that. Then another area I found with the conflict was actually how I was interpreting people's actions and words to me. You know, I was just sort of in my own mindset, and I discovered what projection really meant. I realized that some people will project their feelings and their reactions onto you. So the example is, if you're talking to a sibling or a family member that has the personality type of liking to win an argument or liking to be right, and so they will just keep plugging at you, when actually all I was trying to do is I wanted to make sure I was being heard. And so once I sort of figured out, oh, they're just projecting their personality onto me, because I didn't want to be right or wrong. I just wanted to be heard. But then that got me to the point of realizing, do not take things so personally, because I would start thinking that, oh, this isn't a personal attack on me, you know, they want me to say they're right, and I would be sort of taken aback. But then I realized, no, they were just projecting, they're just being their own way. So I was able to not take it personally, listen to what they say, wait for a pause, and then start talking myself as well. And then the other big thing I learned is that, you know, it's really important to do your best to continue a dialogue calmly, even when you feel like you've been insulted or disrespected. Especially if it's a discussion you need to have. The other thing, this is another big one, was expectations. I stopped expecting people to be different or better than who they are. They are who they are. I am who I am. And I also stopped expecting them to have the same reactions that I had, because that was really important as well. Another thing, fairness. I don't know about you, but I used to always be the kid saying, that's not fair, that's not fair. So it kind of fell into adulthood as well. But I realized, caregiving is rarely fair, and it's not about that at all. It's really just about doing your best to come with an outcome that sort of benefits everybody somewhat. And so some things are going to be a little unfair, some things will be fair, but that's the outcome you want. You want to create something that everybody gets a little bit of something. Then this is a biggie, is forgiveness. A lot of people, we struggle with forgiveness, but a simple mantra that I give to myself is I can choose to be kind rather than right in this moment. So I'm going to choose to be kind. And, and a lot of times you realize when you step back, people will say things a lot of times because they're hurt or they're afraid or they're having an issue, and they're not meaning to upset you. It's just, they're again projecting their fears onto you. And then here's another one that I don't know, I think a lot of you probably on this call are similar because you're probably very empathetic and caring. But I really realized that, being the most self-sacrificing caregiver does not by default make you the best caregiver, because there are a lot of times where you should let your care recipient have their own way, do everything they want. There are times that you need to, and there's examples that I could say, but I'm going to leave it at that because I know we have a short of time. So I think that's sort of the main thing, and we'll discuss the third conflict that I had later on.
Great, thank you so much, Mieko. I really appreciate your experience and your expertise that comes from just the incredible commitment that you have made to caregiving over the past 10 years. It's a big commitment, and our community couldn't operate without people making that kind of commitment. And I know that everybody on the call is part of that, part of making sure that people are tended in our community, that needs are met in our community.
Thank you.
I'm just gonna switch over to share screen so that I can share with you my little presentation here. And we're going to be talking today about the same concepts we were talking about last week. Only last week we talked about how to apply them to ourselves. And this week we're going to talk about how to, after we've done some self-care and self-empathy, how can we represent our experience, represent our truth with honesty, without attacking? And how can we listen to other people with empathy and without taking on the frustrating messages that people give us? So how can we listen with empathy to the heart of somebody else's message, even when they're saying stuff that's difficult to hear? So we're going to look at the core concepts, and I'll overview the process just very briefly. And I'm going to invite you, if you don't already have a pen and paper handy, to have a pen and paper handy. It's fine to do this in your head or just to kind of follow along with myself and Mieko. But I think you'll get the most out of it if you have a situation yourself that you can work on. And if you were working on one from last week, you could continue with that if you like. And at the end, we'll have some time for questions. So just as a review, and for those who are new, the process we're working with is called nonviolent communication. It was developed by a fellow named Dr. Marshall Rosenberg back in the, well, really in the 60s and the 70s. And it actually comes out of his work with children with extreme disabilities, and his work in the civil rights movement in the United States, and helping to racially integrate schools that had been previously been segregated, and navigating the really the student riots and mediating and supporting conflict resolution around that, as well as supporting conflict resolution around inclusion of children with high needs and intense disabilities into classrooms at a time when children were being sent to separate institutions and excluded completely from their school community. So this process begins, I like this tree metaphor. It was developed by my colleague Inbal Kashtan. And so we think about this tree, and at the root of the tree, it's in the rocks and the dirt. And so that's our thoughts of shame and blame and judgment. And if you're a maple syrup fan, then you know that when they tap the trees, it's not rocks and dirt that come out. It's something filtered. It's the nutrients and the water and all the goodness that's filtered out. And so when we have thoughts of shame and blame and judgment, these aren't things that we should then further judge ourselves about, whether they're directed towards ourselves or others. It's an opportunity for us to filter up something nourishing. Anytime that stuff comes up, it lets us know something matters to us. And we want to find out what matters so much. So we begin there in the rocks and the dirt. And then we want to filter like the maple tree does. And we begin with a deep breath and just trying to catch our breath and literally to soothe our brain a little bit. And the self-empathy process we went through last week has to do with just noticing what's going on for ourselves. And I'll walk you through the steps in a moment. And then once we have that clarity and have some methods for taking care of ourselves, we also want to represent ourselves to other people. That's the honesty branch. And we want to listen to other people, and that's the empathy branch. And when things happen we don't like, we go back down into self-empathy. And so we're kind of moving between these branches, and it's not unlike the way that the tree gives out oxygen and takes in carbon dioxide, the way the tree is filtering stuff up out of the ground. So this is like an ecosystem. So the 4 steps for empathy and honesty, whether we're applying it to ourselves or others, is to begin with an observation, to move to the feeling, to figure out what need does that feeling point towards, and then to come up with some clear, concrete, specific, doable requests. So we're going to use a practice scenario, and I'm going to invite Mieko to share a scenario that she has just as a sample so that you can follow along with something. But I want you to think of a situation, and if you're using a page, you can write it down at the very bottom of the page so that you can imagine that you're filtering that message. And I want you to think about a situation of frustration with somebody else, a mild to medium spice. So don't pick the hottest thing that you're dealing with right now. Pick something manageable but real. And it could be any situation that's irritating. Somebody cut you off in traffic, or it could be specific to caregiving. And when you're thinking about that situation, I want you to notice, what are your frustration thoughts? So what are your thoughts of shame or blame or labeling towards the other person, or your thoughts of shame and blame and labeling towards yourself? And just kind of notice what those thoughts are. And if you could write your situation in just like the length of a tweet, just like one sentence or something like that. And so we'll put that sentence at the bottom of the page, and you can track a few of your frustrating thoughts. So Mieko, what's the situation that you have come across from time to time that has led to a bit of conflict or frustration for you?
Well, I tried to select a conflict that I thought a lot of the people might have, because most of us have siblings and most of us have different techniques for caregiving. So in my situation, I have a sibling that's relatively non-involved, but every once in a while makes an appearance. And generally when this sibling comes, and I've learned that it's not to really criticize me, it's to make them feel like they're doing more than they are. She would criticize what I've been doing or making all these suggestions on doing things differently. And then on the my care recipient side, because the person doesn't visit that often, they would be different to this non-involved sibling. So I would always get the complaints, I'm not feeling well, this is wrong, this is bad. And then when the non-involved sibling comes, oh, everything's wonderful. Oh, it's so good to see you. Oh, I'm totally fine. Don't worry about me. Everything's great. And then, and then sometimes on the really bad days is when my care recipient would actually complain to the non-involved sibling of my caregiving. But again, I've learned to transmute that into lessons and learning techniques.
Yeah. So I know you've done lots of work around that, and we're just going to use that kind of situation as a jumping off point. Everything we're doing today, Mieko and I, is hypothetical. We're just imagining. But Mieko's been kind enough to offer this scenario so that we can practice together as a large group. So in order to help us practice, what's really helpful, Mieko, is if we begin with the observation. And the more specific we can be, the easier it is to figure out what the needs are. And so that's a fairly big situation, sort of broad description of it. And in order to move through this process, it would be helpful to have maybe just one specific quote or something the non-involved sibling may have said or done. And it could even be something that you invent, just that sort of matches the kinds of things and that you've heard, so that we can begin to filter through what that might be in a hypothetical way. So what might be something you would have heard that's very like a snapshot or an audio recording of your sibling, that in that kind of situation? What's something they might have said that would particularly kind of set you off?
Well, just, I guess, because my intention, I guess, of all the caregivers, when you're switching over to someone else caregiving, it's important to give certain basic information, like they haven't taken their meds, they need to take their meds, or they need to drink more water, or, please avoid salt, all the simple things, especially when someone's not been there long. And so whenever I would make those suggestions, I would usually get a response like, are you insinuating I don't care? You don't know, you think I don't know about these things? And she would be so defensive and unhappy about it. So yeah, so anyways, I'll just open that up.
Okay, so let's say you hear that quote. Are you insinuating that I don't care and I know things? I'm very involved here. I care more than you do, or something like that. That kind of message, is that, does that fit? So we'll hold that quote. So that's where we want to be. So with your scenario that you're dealing with, I invite you to pick a quote, something quite specific that was said or done, that you could describe like an audio or video recording. So there's a specific thing. And so I want you to write down your observation. That's your first filtering. And then the next thing is, how do you feel? What are the emotions or sensations, free from evaluation? So these are things that you can feel all alone on a desert island, like Tom Hanks in the movie Castaway, when he's trapped on the island with nothing but a volleyball named Wilson. So in that island, he can't feel attacked or manipulated or even ignored, because those are things that require somebody else to do something and for us to judge their behavior. Assessments of somebody's behavior, it's just that they're not feelings. I do caution you against correcting other people. Don't go around saying to somebody, if they say, oh, I'm feeling ignored, don't say to them, that's not a feeling. It'll just irritate them. But I do want you to think about, what can you feel in your heart or your gut that comes up when you hear that phrase? So Mieko, what feelings do you notice, emotions, when you think about your siblings saying, well, are you insinuating that I don't care and that I don't know about what our parent needs, and I care, as much as you, maybe I care more than you, right?
I had a cascade of feelings, because the first feeling was shock. Like, I couldn't believe it was being said. I went, and then I wasn't sure I understood it properly. And then when I did, then I quickly moved to anger, and then to resentment.
So if we remember from last week, anger and resentment are things that point to when we've mixed our thoughts and our feelings together. And so that's also a time for self-empathy. And so I invite you to dive underneath that and notice what's under the anger and resentment. Would that be, frustration or sadness or irritation, or what else do you notice?
It just triggered that whole thing when I said I was the kid that said, that's not fair. That's not fair. That is not fair for you to say that.
It's not fair. Okay. And so so the feeling around that must be like a feeling of just disbelief and maybe, just some real hurt.
It's funny, I didn't get to hurt right away. It was more disbelief, shock,
Okay,
then,
belief and
yeah,
shock. But
first.
eventually you noticed some kind of hurt under there?
I couldn't, I stayed in anger for quite a while. That's the
Yeah.
part.
So I want to just invite you to, instead of thinking about what you actually did, to just
Oh,
think
okay.
about now, as you think about that situation, maybe what feelings are you aware of now?
I think, I realized that this is where I got a lot of the things in my reflection. I realized that, I could feel hurt, I could feel offended, I could do all that. Doesn't serve me, doesn't serve my care recipient. So I need to get past that. So I had to get past my anger, past my resentment, and that's where I got into forgiveness and all these other,
So I don't want you to go there too fast, because the folks on the call need to be able to travel with us, and you're leaping ahead a little bit. So I just want.
Well, I've had 10 years. It wasn't that fast.
You've had 10 years, some folks have had like one maybe. So let's stick with the feelings for now. So there's that feeling that's a sensation free from evaluation. So it could be the resentment and the anger. It could be there's some disbelief or hurt or some irritation or frustration. And those are the kind of the pure feelings. And what we know about feelings is that these are notifiers, like the notifier on your cell phone. And when your cell phone buzzes or rings, you answer it, and you look to see what's there, or you listen to the voice of the person on the other end. And there's a reason you do that, because it could be important. And I would like to suggest that your system, and I said this last week, that your system is more elegant and complex than anything IBM or Apple will ever imagine or create. And your system is giving notifiers all the time. And so when we have a contracted feeling, and what Mieko is describing are contracted sensations, right? The frustration, the tension, that's a tightness, right? So we can notice that somewhere in our body. Sometimes our body notices it before we have words for it. And that's a notifier letting us know that there is a need that is going unmet. So in our system, when we open up the system, the text message or the voice message coming in is the need, the underlying universal human need. So that the contracted feeling points to an unmet need, and the expansive feelings point to needs that are really well met. And both are worth paying attention to, because the more we pay attention to them, the easier it is for us to do things that tend our needs really well and tend the needs of others. So I want you to think about needs as something co-occurring, not as a hierarchy, the way that Abraham Maslow originally described it. And to think about these as just the water that we swim in. And so in the situation that you're talking about, Mieko, I want to just invite you to think about, so just thinking about right now, because our experience is always kind of in the present moment. And so right now, let's imagine that you've just heard that message. Well, what, are you insinuating that I don't care enough, or are you insinuating that I don't care as much as you? And you notice, okay, there's the direct quote, the observation. Are you insinuating that I don't care as much as you? I know as much as you. Maybe I care more, right? Then there's the feeling. Oh, yeah, I feel some real anger and resentment. And if I go underneath that, there's some shock first, and then anger and resentment, and some disbelief, and maybe even irritation or hurt or grief, or just exasperation. Could be any of those things. Those are the notifiers. And so then we want to check in, what is the need there? What is the need or the value? And so I'm just wondering, Mieko, if you look at this list, I've got in the circles sort of some umbrella needs, and then some needs that hover around those. Is there maybe one or two, as you look at that list, that really fit for you around this situation? And folks on the call, I invite you to just take a moment and think, in your situation, what are you really yearning for right now? So this is a way that we can explore that. What are you yearning for right now?
What really jumps out too, belonging and community actualization. Because to me, caregiving, at least in my family, in my mind, I thought it was a family situation. It was, we should all care the same amount. We should all want to help the same amount. At least that's what I initially thought.
Yeah. So, and that's something to trust, right? We can trust what's coming up for us in our bodies. And so, that deep yearning for belonging and for community connection, for community well-being. I'm guessing in there maybe something about mutual support and mutual respect in relation to your sibling.
Yes, and belonging to being a family member, an equal, and not just equal, but you would like to think you have partners in your caregiving, and you would assume your sibling would be your most obvious partner.
So is that about something that's about maybe support, about shared support and sharing responsibility together? Okay. So when we're thinking about needs, we want to be aware that they are not location specific or person specific. So our needs are there whether or not the other person ever does anything that we want. So in this instance, Mieko's sister has said a thing that's brought up this need around mutual support and belonging, about community, community well-being, community actualization. And for you, there might be more casual language that you have for this kind of thing. But the reality is that Mieko's sister could walk away from this situation without ever doing anything to tend that need. And now Mieko is walking around with an unmet need, or with awareness of a need that's yearning to be met. And so the sister's gone away, gone on an airplane. Maybe you're not going to see that sister for a block of time. And now you're walking around with a yearning for mutual support and belonging. And it becomes really important that we find ways to tend that. It could be as simple, pardon me, it could be as simple as turning our own compassionate gaze towards that. And that's the self-empathy piece we were talking about last week. And I invite people to come up with strategies to take care of yourself, to take care of those needs. But when we first just want to say to ourselves, no wonder. So we're not asking a question here. We're not saying, I wonder if. We're just noticing, oh, no wonder the frustration and shock, and no wonder the anger and resentment. That need for mutual support, the need for community connection and belonging is so important. And every human being has had it since the beginning of time. It's part of why I am involved in caregiving. Oh, no wonder the pain. And we're just bringing a compassionate gaze to ourselves in that moment and making space for that. Sometimes these needs are going deeply unmet in us or in the people we're supporting, and we're witnessing unmet needs. We could witness it in the world around us. Our needs live in us, but they're also something that we hold in relation to other people. And so we want to find a way towards self-empathy. And if you haven't had a chance to watch that video once it's posted, I encourage you to take a look at that, because this is really a foundational piece before we begin to speak to other people, and before even we begin to come up with concrete strategies to take care of things, because those old unmet needs, they're the ones that just need our loving care. And we want to turn our attention to that the way we would support a distressed child, and just say, oh, welcome. There's that old ache again. Welcome, old friend. You remind me of how precious my need for mutual support is. I stand for this, and you remind me that this is an important part of life, of living. So that's one way to meet needs. Then we can meet needs like we talked about last week, and we're not going to do this right now because we're going to focus on the conflict piece. But typically, before people speak to other people, I encourage you to come up with some ways to build some abundance for yourself, and to make sure that you're finding ways to meet that need for mutual support. In Mieko's case, and belonging, how can she meet that need alone? Which is a tricky question when you're thinking about something like mutual support. And so we need to think about things like journaling or prayer or meditation or other acts that a person can do alone that are somehow mutually supportive. How can you do that with another person who's not the person who set it off? How can you do that in community? And how can you meet that need in nature with a pet, or out on a walk, or even as simple as a little flower that you put in a corner and look at? So we're going to skip this part for today. I just want people to be aware that this is one of the steps. When we open our mouth, so we're going into the tree now, right? So we've been down at the bottom of the tree and we've moved up through observation and feelings and needs. We've said no wonder and we've taken care of ourselves. And now we're going to try and make an honest expression to the other person. So in order to do that, we want to have in our mind a couple of things. So when we speak to somebody else, we're making the clear observation, when I hear or see X, whatever it is that you specifically saw, I feel Y. I feel sad, frustrated, irritated, because I need, and in this case it's mutual support, would you, and now we're going to ask a question, would you do something? So in this case, we always want to ask a question that's about connection. We want to make a request for connection before action. People can't do what we want them to do if they don't trust that we also value their needs. They also can't do what we want if they haven't actually heard what we've said. And so we want to check that out. So we start with something like, how are you? How are you feeling? How are you after hearing that mutual support and belonging matter so much to me? How are you? The other request we can ask is, what's the main thing you're hearing me say? This matters so much to me. I'm just not sure that I'm saying it as clearly as I could. What's the main thing you're hearing me say? And in this case, Mieko's sibling might come back with, well, you're just always talking about you and your experience. And I care actually more than you. And I just don't know why you're going on. And this is just, so that's the kind of thing you get back. And that's useful because it lets you know they didn't hear you. They couldn't hear you. They may never be able to hear you. And this is important because at some point you may choose to just disengage, as Mieko has talked about. But in this instance, we're going to look at trying to stay connected and engaged. And then once they've been heard, we move to action. Would you do X? Would you be willing to let me know how you would like me to transition the information to you? So that would be a concrete, specific, present time request. Would you let me know what's a simple way that you would like to receive information from me, because this transition is important. So we've moved up the tree. We're going to try the honesty and the empathy. And so this is filling out the tree a little bit for you. So in terms of Mieko, and you can do this in your sheet of paper, is to try and think about what is your honesty statement. So it will be, when I see or hear something, I feel blank because I need something, not because I need you to do something, but I need belonging. I need support. And I'm wondering if you would do X, okay? And then when we're listening to somebody else, we're going to guess, are you feeling because you need? So we're not going to say, are you feeling because you need me to do something? We want to let the need just be there as it is. Are you feeling frustrated because you need reassurance? Could be something like that. So in this case, Mieko, your observation would be, when I hear you say, am I that I'm insinuating that you don't care as much as me? I feel really shocked and frustrated because I have a need for mutual support, for us to be supporting each other. And I'm just wondering, sister, if you can tell me what you're hearing me say. I'm just curious, what's the heart of what you're getting from me? So give me what you might get back from her. And you folks are going to watch Mieko and I dance around between these things, okay?
Well, actually, I've said and done a lot of the things that you suggested.
So just for the interest of time, because we're so close to the end, and I know you have a really comprehensive understanding, but just throw back at me just some statement that she might say or that a person might say.
Oh, well, she would just say she didn't understand. Why would I even be saying such silliness? It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, why are you even saying this? And so then I'm going to dance over to empathy. Oh, sister, are you kind of puzzled about why I'm talking in this weird way? And you just want I don't know, things to be easy and clear. And the sister might say, well, yes, you know, like, come on, I have limited time here and it's very important to me, and I care so much, and why are you giving me such a hard time? And then I'm going to dance down into self-empathy. Oh, when I hear this, I just feel so frustrated. I can't believe this person's even saying these things. Right. Oh, right. I have a need for mutual support and belonging, and also for the well-being of the parent we're both caring for. What am I going to do for myself? I have some strategies. I'm going to try listening again. In this situation, she's letting me know she can't hear me. So I might say, sister, I'm wondering, yeah, I'm just wondering if what you want most right now is to just be able to have some quality time with mom. Yes, I really care about mom, and you're the one that's always doing the things. So I don't want to get caught up in all these stories. I want to go, okay, right. So the sister's telling me how important that is, and just wanting to be there. And so I can listen quietly, or I can try speaking it out loud. And when I see her relax a little bit, which may not happen, so doesn't always work out this way, but if she takes a deep breath, I know that she trusts I've heard her. And at that point, I can come back and say, you know, when you say that I'm insinuating that you don't care, I'm really shocked, because I have a need for mutual support. And I'm just wondering, you know, if you could let me know what's a simple way I could transition the information to you, because I know that we both care about that. The other thing that I can say at that point is, I'm wondering, sister, what's a way that we could take care of your need for some quality time and my need to just make sure that the information is transitioned? What ideas do you have? Or could we agree on a time when we could do that later? So this is kind of the dance that we're doing back and forth with each other, between self-empathy, honesty, and empathy.
Thank you very much. There was some very heartfelt sharing of situations there, Mieko. We really appreciate that.